Welcome to Module 9. We're going to talk about breast cancer and environmental degradation this week. This week also begins a new and the last section of the course, the politics of disease. We've been talking about the politics of disease all semester, but this week we make it a major focus. The politics of disease, as defined in your textbook, are decisions we make about a disease, about research on the disease, and on coping with the disease that are not based on biology or facts, but on politics of how we make decisions and our attitudes about that disease. Module 9 focuses on breast cancer and environmental degradation. It's not really evenly balanced. There will be more on breast cancer than environmental degradation, but the two things are linked, at least in my mind. But let's talk about what you're going to see this week. First, when we talk about breast cancer, you're going to see a lot about cause marketing. That is, when companies use something like the pink ribbon, and the pink ribbon is the most obvious example in the politics of women's health. But they use these kinds of associations with a cause to get you to buy their products. We need to think about whether that genuinely supports a cause or whether it's just smart marketing for products. A lot of the movie you're going to watch as the last installment of the Politics of Women's Health Film Festival is called Pink Ribbons Incorporated, and it focuses on exactly this question. We're also going to focus on attitudes toward cancer in general, but especially breast cancer, particularly the idea that people expect breast cancer patients to be cheerful despite their diagnosis, and even hold them responsible for that cheerful attitude. We're going to focus on questions of how we direct resources when it comes to breast cancer. Do we focus on early diagnosis, on treatment, on prevention? What's behind those decisions, and are they strictly medical? We're also going to, when we turn to the environment, think about ways that the environment causes certain illnesses, perhaps including breast cancer. We're not going to focus so much on climate change, though we certainly could talk about the way that climate change is already affecting and will continue to affect health. But we will think specifically about chemicals loose in the environment, how they are likely having effects on health. Just as a kind of basic background, one thing to know is that while individual chemicals have to be, or at least are supposed to be, tested for safety, there is no standard testing of chemicals in their interaction with other chemicals when they are released into the environment, even in products when the chemicals are mixed together. Scary, no? But when you think about the fact that there are more than 50,000 chemicals out there in our environment, you can also imagine how it would be virtually impossible for us to test all their interactions. This is one of the major challenges when we think about chemicals loose in our environment. I'll mention here that I put a reading on our resources page from the Rolling Stone about the chemicals they use in fracking, which appear to be causing infant mortality in Utah. The story details the work that one midwife there is doing to try to call attention to the problem. Lastly, there is a Focus On section for this module that examines breast cancer art and the ways that we have used art as an alternative way of understanding the politics of disease and perhaps of treating and fighting the disease too. First, let me mention that I'm recording this outside in my yard, and there may be a little bit of traffic noise. I apologize, but it's better than trying to do it in my house where my animals are being really awful today. Okay, so first, a couple of things about this week. This week, there is both a quiz and a thought experiment. Previously, you've had one or the other, but in this module, there are two, so don't let that sneak up on you. I've mentioned before, and Vicki seconded, that the thought experiments have not been as carefully done as I think they could be. Remember to really follow the instructions, pay attention to the rubric, and please step outside the comfort zone of a simple paper. Add some visual interest that can also add depth to your presentation. To give you some help, I've posted a couple of thought experiments that were turned in by one of my students in an earlier section of this course. Mackenzie Stepp has gone on to graduate and is now working for a health promotion nonprofit. She tells me that she uses the skills that she honed while doing the thought experiments almost every day on her job. If you need some help this week, you'll need to plan early to talk to me. I'm headed to Canada the day after the election. No, really. I'm going to the National Women's Studies Association the day after the election, and it happens to be in Canada this year. Don't worry, I'm taking my computer with me so I can stay in touch if you really need me, and I can finish out the semester if it turns out I have to stay in Canada after the election. Don't forget to vote. I think it might be useful to give you some background on my experience with breast cancer, as it will give you a sense of where I'm coming from on the issues. When my husband and I were in our 30s, we had finally gotten jobs at the same university and gotten tenure, and we were trying to have a baby. After a couple of years of trying, I still wasn't pregnant, so I started up an infertility workup. My doctor was taking a very complete medical history and realized that my mother had just been diagnosed with colon cancer. There is a genetic link between some colon cancers and some breast cancers, and there wasn't yet a genetic test for that, so she wanted me to get a screening baseline mammogram, even though I was still only in my late 30s. Well, they found a lump right up against my chest wall, one that no one could feel, even when they knew it was there. Everyone was very confident it was going to be nothing, but I went through all the tests anyway. It turned out not to be nothing. It was a 2-centimeter, very aggressive cancer. Cancer in younger women is almost always an aggressive form, and it had already spread to the lymph nodes under my arm. That's stage 2B. They did a lumpectomy and removed all the lymph nodes out from under my arm, but they left what is called a dirty margin on the primary tumor. I had 9 months of chemotherapy. And right after my last chemo, I went in for a mammogram, and the primary tumor had returned in the scar. At that point, the only thing they could do was a mastectomy, so they did the mastectomy and a reconstruction before I had radiation. I finished radiation in May of 1999, and I've been cancer-free ever since. My early scholarship, that is before I was sick, was on illness and literature, and since my cancer, I've been working on breast cancer as a cultural and literary issue. That is, how do people represent cancer in essays, autobiography, literature, even in a Supreme Court decision? I've published quite a bit about it. You may hear me sounding fairly opinionated during these presentations, but, well, I have been working on this for a very long time, and I do have some strong opinions, but they are mostly based on research. I will say this, it was a terrible, terrible experience, even though I was one of the lucky ones who got through it. It got caught while it was still curable. I have lost so many friends and colleagues to the disease, and even more have been diagnosed and gone through the treatment. I may occasionally sound a little casual or flip about it, but trust me, I'm not. While pretty much everyone who survives cancer ends up with a good dose of what's called tumor humor, we all know that cancer is a very serious issue. But I'm convinced that the reason it's on the rise has to do with our environment. Hence, for me, the connection between the two parts of this week. Okay, go do the reading. Don't forget to read in the textbook and watch the video, and then come on back here for some Beyond the Readings and focus on presentations. And have a good week.